This wasn't a bomb. This wasn't a missile strike. This wasn't a failed military experiment. This was a rock, only 20 meters across, a cosmic pebble. And we didn't see it coming. NASA scientists? They discovered it after it exploded. The most advanced space agency in the world, with its inherited funding and satellites that monitor the sky, they had no idea it existed until people started posting videos online. And now, here's the fun part. This asteroid released the energy of 30 Hiroshima bombs. 30. And it was tiny. Astronomers call it a near-Earth object. I call it a warning. Welcome down the rabbit hole. I'm Makar Sidra, and today we're talking about extinction, not dinosaurs, not some ancient mass extinction you learned about in 7th grade. We're talking about ourselves, about humanity, about you, about me, about everyone you know, and about the other 8 billion people currently causing chaos on this planet. And here's the unsettling truth that's been haunting scientists. We're living through the most dangerous period in human history, not because of what might happen, but because of what we're doing right now. So, brace yourself. Things are about to get dark, but stay with me, because understanding how we die is the first step toward not dying. Let's begin our search for the truth. Why extinction is the rule, not the exception. Here's a question. Do you think humanity is special? And I don't mean philosophically, but biologically. Do you think we're somehow immune to the rules that govern all other species on this planet? Because here's what the fossil record tells us. 99.9% of all species that have ever existed on Earth are extinct. Gone. Gone. Let me put that in perspective. Scientists estimate that between 5 and 50 billion species have lived on this planet over the past 3.5 billion years, and almost all of them are dead. Take trilobites, for example. These tiny, armored marine creatures that looked like prehistoric insects dominated Earth's oceans for 270 million years. 270 million years. By comparison, modern humans, Homo sapiens, have only been around for about 300,000 years. We're babies. We're just a rough draft in geological time. And what about the trilobites, after their 270 million year reign of terror? They went extinct in the Permian extinction event, which wiped out about 95% of marine species. The planet regenerated, or consider the dinosaurs. These creatures dominated the Earth for about 165 million years. They survived ice ages, volcanic winters, and countless climate shifts. They evolved into hundreds of species, from tiny bird-like creatures to the largest land animals that ever lived. Then, 66 million years ago, a rock from space hit, and they were gone. 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 You might be thinking, well, sure, but we're different. We're smart. We have technology. We can predict asteroid impacts now. Well, most of them. We have medicine, agriculture, nuclear power, and smartphones with apps that tell us when to drink water. And you're right. We are different. But what keeps researchers at places like Oxford's Future of Humanity Institute up at night is this. Our intelligence may not be our salvation. It may be our greatest burden. Dr. David Raab, a paleontologist at the University of Chicago, wrote a book called Extinction, Bad Genes or Bad Luck, in which he argues that extinction is not a failure, nor is it a punishment for not adapting. Extinction is the natural state of existence. Survival is the exception. Imagine, if every species that ever evolved had survived forever, this planet would be uninhabitable. We would have 50 billion species piled on top of each other, like a terrifying nightmare for biodiversity. Extinction is how the Earth rides itself of its traces. It's how evolution makes way for new experiments. The question isn't, will humans go extinct? The question is, how will humans go extinct, and when? Unlike the dinosaurs, we already have data on this. We know the risks. We've quantified them. Scientists have published research that includes estimates of different extinction probabilities. The astronomer royal, Sir Martin Rees, wrote a book called Our Final Hour, in which he argues that humanity's chance of surviving until 2100 without a catastrophe-ending civilization is less than 50%. Let me repeat, less than 50%. A coin toss. These odds are roughly equivalent to guessing heads or tails correctly. We're not talking about extreme conspiracy theorists here. We're talking about some of the most respected scientists in their fields, looking at the data and saying, yes, we may not survive. So, let's talk about how this happened. And I promise you, it's more interesting and more terrifying than any disaster movie Hollywood has ever made. Part 2, Scenario 1, the plague that would actually wipe us out. In 541 AD, a merchant ship arrived in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, carrying grain from Alexandria. Sounds normal, right? But the ship was also carrying rats, and the rats were carrying fleas, and the fleas were carrying a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. The plague of Justinian was about to begin. Over the next few years, this plague killed between 30 and 50 million people. That's about 20% of the world's population at the time. 1 in 5 people died. Some villages lost 80% of their population. They simply disappeared. And it wasn't the last time. The Black Death in the 14th century killed between 25 and 40% of Europe's population. The 1918 Spanish flu killed about 5% of the world's population. That's 50 to 100 million people. You might be thinking, well, we survived all that. We recovered. We have modern medicine now. We developed multiple COVID vaccines in less than a year. Yes, you're right, we did. A golden star for humanity. But here's the thing, COVID-19, in the grand scheme of pandemics, was a stepping stone. The JV team was the one who worked on combating the pandemic. The pandemic was in an easy position. The COVID mortality rate? Less than 1%. For every 100 people infected, fewer than 1 died. It was highly contagious, yes, but not particularly deadly. Now compare that to some other viruses we know about. SARS had a mortality rate of 9 to 11%. MERS kills about 34% of those infected. Ebola, up to 90% in some outbreaks. Fortunately, these most deadly viruses haven't been very good at spreading between humans. Ebola requires direct contact with bodily fluids. MERS jumped primarily from camels to humans, but it hasn't maintained human-to-human transmission as effectively. But here's the nightmare scenario virologists are considering. What if one of these deadly viruses mutated and gained the ability to spread like COVID-19 or the flu? What if Ebola became airborne? We don't need to imagine what that would look like. It's quite simple. A virus with a 90% lethality rate that spreads as easily as the flu would be a catastrophic event. And before you say, that's impossible, viruses don't do that, let me introduce you to the concept of real-time viral evolution. Scientists currently estimate that there are about 1.7 million unknown viruses in wildlife. Viruses we haven't discovered yet because they lurk in bats, pangolins, rodents, and birds. Between 25% and 50% of these viruses could potentially jump to humans. And what makes matters worse? We're simply rolling out the red carpet for them. In the last 100 years, humans have cleared roughly 30% of the world's forests. We're destroying habitats at a rate unprecedented in Earth's history. And when we destroy these ecosystems, animals don't just disappear, they move closer to us. Bats that once lived deep in the forests are now inhabiting city parks. Rodents are invading human settlements. Animals that never came into contact with humans are suddenly living in our backyards. Every forest we clear is like a lottery ticket to the next pandemic, and we're buying thousands of tickets every day. There's also climate change to consider. As permafrost thaws in Siberia and northern Canada, we're finding bacteria and viruses frozen for 50,000 years. In 2016, a thawed reindeer carcass released anthrax spores in Siberia, killing a child and infecting dozens. What else is in that ice? We don't know. But we are about to find out. And then there's the darkest possibility: engineered pandemics. Between 2011 and 2014, scientists in the US conducted research called gain-of-function studies. The goal was noble: take dangerous viruses like bird flu and modify them to be more transmissible, so we could study them and prepare treatments. Bird flu has a 50% fatality rate. 50% of those infected die within 2 days. 50% of those infected die within 3 days. 50% of those infected die within 4 days. 50% of those infected die within 5 days. 50% of those infected die within 10 days. 50% of those infected die within 20 days. 50% of those infected die within 30 days. 50% of those infected die within 40 days. 50% of those infected die within 60 days. 50% of those infected die within 90 days. 50% of those infected die within 120 days. 50% of those infected die within 180 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 days. 50 50%. If you catch it, flip a coin. That's your survival odds. Luckily, it barely spreads between humans. But these studies were asking, what if it did? How would we fight it? The Obama administration halted this research in 2014 because, creating superviruses in labs seemed like maybe a bad idea. Then the Trump administration partially restarted it in 2017 with stricter safety protocols. But here's the question. Can we guarantee these viruses stay in the lab? History says no. In 1977, a flu virus spread globally that was genetically identical to one from 1950. That's impossible through natural evolution. Viruses mutate constantly. Scientists concluded it likely escaped from a lab. In 1979, a Soviet bioweapons facility accidentally released anthrax, killing dozens in a nearby town. The USSR denied it for years. In 2007, a foot-and-mouth disease outbreak in the UK was traced to a research facility with a broken pipe. Even with modern safety protocols, accidents happen. Labs handling deadly pathogens have reported hundreds of safety incidents. And that's just accidents. What about deliberate misuse?
History is full of humans weaponizing disease. In medieval warfare, armies would catapult plague-infected corpses over city walls. During World War II, Japan's Unit 731 deliberately infected Chinese civilians with plague and cholera, killing hundreds of thousands. In the 1990s, a religious cult in Japan called Aum Shinrikyo tried to weaponize anthrax and botulism. They failed, but they tried.
Today, we have CRISPR gene editing technology that's accessible to anyone with a biology degree and some basic lab equipment. You can literally order the components online. So here's the uncomfortable truth. The next existential pandemic might not come from a wet market or a bat cave. It might come from a lab, and it might not be an accident. Toby Ord, a researcher at Oxford's Future of Humanity Institute, estimates the odds of human extinction from a naturally occurring pandemic in the next century at about 1 in 10,000. But extinction from an engineered pathogen, either through accident or malice, he puts those odds at 1 in 30. 1 in 30. Sleep tight. Section 3, Scenario 2, Nuclear Winter. Let me tell you about Vasily Arkhipov. You've probably never heard of him, but you're alive because of him. October 27th, 1962, height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. A Soviet submarine, the B-59, is sitting in the Caribbean near Cuba. They've been underwater for days. It's hot. The air is bad. The crew is exhausted, and they've lost communication with Moscow. The Americans have been dropping depth charges near them, not to destroy them, but to force them to surface. But the submarine crew doesn't know that. They think World War III has started. The captain, Valentin Savitsky, is convinced they're under attack. He has a nuclear torpedo. He wants to fire it. Soviet protocol requires 3 officers to approve a nuclear launch: the captain, the political officer, and the second in command. The captain votes yes. The political officer votes yes. The second in command, Vasily Arkhipov, votes no. If Arkhipov had agreed, that torpedo, equivalent to the Hiroshima bomb, would have been launched at the American fleet. The U.S. would have retaliated. The USSR would have responded. Both sides had thousands of nuclear weapons ready to go. One man's no prevented nuclear apocalypse, and this wasn't a one-time thing. In 1983, a Soviet officer named Stanislav Petrov was monitoring early warning systems when alarms started blaring. His screen showed 5 American ICBMs headed for Moscow. Launch time, minutes away. His job was simple: call leadership and confirm the attack so they could launch a counterstrike. But something felt wrong. Why would the Americans only launch 5 missiles? If they were starting nuclear war, wouldn't they launch everything? Petrov decided it was a system malfunction. He didn't report it. He was right. It was a glitch caused by sunlight reflecting off clouds. If he'd followed protocol, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because neither of us would exist.
So here's where we are today. Despite decades of treaties and disarmament efforts, there are still approximately 12,000 nuclear warheads in the world. The US has about 5,400. Russia has roughly 6,000. China, France, UK, India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea have the rest.
And unlike the Cold War, where it was basically two players, now we have multiple nuclear-armed countries with various levels of stability and various regional conflicts. India and Pakistan? Both have nukes. Both have fought multiple wars. Both have ongoing territorial disputes. If India and Pakistan went to war and exchanged just 100 nuclear weapons, a small fraction of what they have, here's what would happen, according to research by Dr. Alan Robach at Rutgers University. Stage 1. Immediate deaths. 50 to 125 million people die instantly from the blasts and initial radiation. That's roughly equivalent to both world wars combined, happening in an afternoon. Stage 2. The fires. The nuclear detonations would create firestorms that generate about 5 million tons of smoke and soot. This isn't regular smoke. This is material that's been superheated to the point where it rises into the stratosphere and stays there. Stage 3. The darkness. That smoke would block out the sun across large portions of the planet. Global temperatures would drop 1–2 degrees Celsius. Doesn't sound like much, right? Wrong. Rainfall would decrease by about 30% globally. Growing seasons would shorten. Wheat production would fall 15–30%. Corn production would drop 20–40%. And that's just from a regional nuclear exchange between two relatively small nuclear powers. Now let's talk about the big one. A full exchange between the US and Russia. Scientists at the University of Colorado modeled what would happen if the US and Russia used just half of their nuclear arsenals against each other. First, the immediate death toll, 200 to 325 million people, gone in the first few hours. Then comes the nuclear winter. 150 million tons of smoke would be injected into the atmosphere. The sun would be blocked by 70%. Global temperatures would plummet 8–13 degrees Celsius. For reference, during the last ice age, global temperatures were only about 5 to 6 degrees cooler than today. This would be worse. The oceans would freeze. Half the planet wouldn't see temperatures above freezing for months at a time. Photosynthesis would essentially stop. Agriculture in Northern Europe, Russia, China, Japan, Canada, all gone. The world would lose 80% of its food production capacity. By the end of year 2, researchers estimate 5 billion people would die of starvation. That's more than half of everyone alive today. 99% of China's population, dead. 75% of the US and Russia, dead. 99% of the UK and Northern Europe, dead. But wait, it gets worse. The smoke wouldn't just block the sun and cause a nuclear winter. It would also destroy about 75% of the ozone layer. So after 3 years of freezing darkness, when the smoke finally clears and the sun returns, it would be deadly. Ultraviolet radiation would pour through what's left of the atmosphere. Anyone who survived the winter would face massive UV exposure, skin cancer, blindness, crop failures from radiation damage, marine food chains collapsing as plankton die off. The few million humans left would be facing a planet that's essentially uninhabitable. Now you might think, that's crazy. No one would actually launch a full nuclear war. We're not that stupid. And maybe you're right. Maybe. But remember, we've come within minutes of accidental nuclear war at least twice that we know about. And those are just the declassified incidents. In August 2022, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told world leaders, "Humanity is one misunderstanding, one miscalculation away from nuclear annihilation." Not an activist, not a conspiracy theorist, the head of the United Nations. The Cold War is over, but the weapons remain, the tensions remain. And the risks might actually be higher now because there are more players, more complexity, more chances for things to go wrong. All it takes is one accident, one miscommunication, one malfunction, one leader making the wrong call in a moment of panic. And unlike pandemics or climate change, nuclear war would be over fast, hours, maybe days. But the consequences would last decades. The dinosaurs had 165 million years. We might not even make it to 500,000. Section 4. Scenario 3. Climate collapse. What's your body temperature right now? Probably around 37 degrees or 98.6 degrees. That's normal, that's healthy. Now, what happens if your temperature goes up by just 2 degrees? You feel crappy. 3 degrees, you're sick. 4 degrees, you're in serious trouble. 5 degrees, hospital time. Your body is a finely tuned system. Small changes in core temperature mean big problems. Earth is the same way. In 1988, world leaders issued the Toronto Declaration, warning that climate change had reached catastrophic levels, comparable only to global nuclear war and its potential destruction. That was 1988, 36 years ago. Since then, we've had countless climate conferences, the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, endless debates about keeping global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees, or at most 2 degrees C above pre-industrial levels. And in 2024, we blew past 1.5 degrees C. We're now on track for 2 to 4 degrees C of warming by 2100, and that's if we actually follow through on current commitments, which we won't. But wait, you might say, 2 to 4 degrees doesn't sound that bad. It gets 10 degrees hotter every time summer rolls around. We'll just use more air conditioning. And this is where most people fundamentally misunderstand climate change. We're not talking about weather. We're talking about global average temperatures. That means oceans, poles, tropics, everything averaged together. The last ice age? The one where woolly mammoths roamed and glaciers covered half of North America? Earth was only about 5 to 6 degrees cooler than today. 5 degrees. That's it. So a 3 to 4 degree increase? That's geological catastrophe and fast forward. Let's walk through what 2 to 4 degrees of warming actually means. Phase 1. The uninhabitable zone. Right now, if you look at a map of global temperatures, the hottest inhabited places have an annual average temperature around 26 to 27 degrees C. That's places like Riyadh or Kuwait City, already brutal, but survivable with modern infrastructure. With 3-4 degrees C of warming, about 2 billion people will be living in zones with average temperatures around 29 degrees C. For context, the only places on Earth that are hot right now are in the deep Sahara Desert, where humans don't permanently live. During heat waves, these regions will see temperatures reaching 50-55 degrees C, 122-131 degrees C. That's not drink more water and you'll be fine heat. That's your body physically cannot cool itself and you will die heat. The human body starts to fail around 35 degrees C wet bulb temperature. That's temperature combined with humidity. At that point, sweating doesn't work anymore. You can't cool down. Organ failure begins within hours. Parts of South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and even southern United States would become functionally uninhabitable for portions of the year. We're talking about 2 billion people who will need to leave, the largest migration in human history. Where do they go? Who takes them in? Phase 2. Agricultural collapse. As temperatures rise, growing zones shift. Plants are sensitive. They need specific temperatures, rainfall patterns, and seasonal cycles. Corn yields could drop by 68% in affected regions. Wheat, rice, staple crops that billions depend on, all face massive disruptions. And here's the cruel irony. The places that will be hit hardest are the poorest countries that contributed least to the problem. But don't worry, rich countries, you're not safe either. Phase 3. The feedback loops. This is where it gets really fun. Climate change doesn't progress linearly. It has tipping points, moments where the system shifts into a new state and there's no going back. Example: Arctic ice. Ice is white. It reflects sunlight. When ice melts, you get dark water, which absorbs heat, which melts more ice, which exposes more dark water. It's a runaway process, or permafrost. Frozen ground in Siberia and Canada contains massive amounts of methane, a greenhouse gas 28 times more potent than CO2. As temperatures rise, the permafrost melts, releasing methane, which causes more warming, which melts more permafrost. We're not pushing a boulder up a hill anymore. We've pushed it over the edge, and now it's rolling downhill, picking up speed. Phase 4. The cascade. With higher temperatures comes more water evaporation. More evaporation means bigger storms, more intense hurricanes, flooding in some places, droughts in others. We'll also see more wildfires, We're already seeing this in California, Australia, the Mediterranean. More fires mean more CO2 released, more warming, more fires. Disease vectors change too. Mosquitoes carrying malaria and dengue fever move into regions that were previously too cold. Diseases that were regional become global. A study from the University of Cambridge points out that most climate discussions focus on optimistic scenarios, ones where we magically get our act together at the last minute and implement dramatic changes. But the realistic scenario, the one we're actually living, that's 2 degrees C by 2100. And at that point, we're not talking about saving the planet. We're talking about triage. Which cities do we abandon? Which countries become uninhabitable? How do we handle billions of refugees? How do we grow enough food? Oh, and I haven't even mentioned sea level rise. When the ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica melt, not if, when, sea levels could rise 70 meters over the next few centuries. New York, gone. London, underwater. Tokyo, flooded. Shanghai, Mumbai, Miami, Venice, Amsterdam, all drowned. Alexandria, Egypt, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. The Mediterranean will reclaim it. Billions of people live in coastal cities. Where do they go? Here's the thing that makes climate change uniquely terrifying. Once certain feedback loops trigger, we can't stop them. Even if we cut emissions to zero tomorrow, some changes are already locked in. We've loaded the gun, aimed it at our own head, and now we're debating whether to pull the trigger or just apply a little more pressure. The dinosaurs didn't cause their own extinction. We are. Section 5. Scenario 4. The sky is falling, literally. Remember that asteroid in Chelyabinsk? The one that exploded with 30 times the force of Hiroshima, and we didn't see it coming? Let's talk about what happens when we don't get lucky. 66 million years ago, an asteroid about 10-15 kilometers wide struck the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The impact was so violent that it released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs. The impact site, now called the Chicxulub crater, was ground zero for the worst day in Earth's history. Within minutes, global firestorms. Within hours, the atmosphere filled with debris. Within days, the sun disappeared. Within months, photosynthesis stopped. Within years, 76% of all species went extinct, including, most famously, the dinosaurs. Now here's the question. Could that happen again? And the answer is absolutely yes. As of September 2025, NASA has identified about 39,000 near-Earth objects, asteroids and comets that cross Earth's orbital path. Of those, 873 are larger than 1 kilometer in diameter. 1 kilometer. That's big enough to cause a regional extinction event. 10 kilometers? Global catastrophe. The good news, we found most of the really big ones, maybe 95% of asteroids over 1 kilometer. The bad news, NASA estimates there are about 50 asteroids over 1 kilometer that we haven't found yet, and about 14,000 asteroids over 140 meters, still big enough to destroy a city that we have no idea about. Visual, radar screens, space monitoring. In 2020, an asteroid called 2020 VT4 passed within 370 kilometers of Earth. For reference, the International Space Station orbits at about 400 kilometers. This thing came closer to us than the ISS. When did we detect it? 15 hours after it flew by. Imagine if that had actually hit. Major city gone, millions dead, and we wouldn't have known until it was already over. This happens more often than you think. Asteroids pass close to Earth all the time, and we frequently discover them after they've already passed. Dr. Stephen Tingay, an Australian astronomer, published a paper explaining that while we've done well at finding the big asteroids, we still have massive blind spots. Asteroids approaching from the direction of the sun are especially hard to detect. And the problem is funding.
The entire global effort to track dangerous asteroids is underfunded and relies on a handful of telescopes. But asteroids aren't even the worst threat from space. Let me introduce you to gamma-ray bursts. A gamma-ray burst, or GRB, is what happens when a massive star explodes, or when two neutron stars collide. It releases more energy in 10 seconds than our sun will emit in its entire 10 billion year lifetime. If a GRB occurred within 6,000 light-years of Earth and was pointed in our direction, it would strip away much of our ozone layer in seconds. No ozone now, no protection from UV radiation. Crops would die. Marine ecosystems would collapse. Skin cancer rates would skyrocket. The food chain would break. But that's so unlikely, you might say. Except scientists think it's already happened. About 450 million years ago, the Ordovician extinction event killed off 85% of marine species. Many researchers believe a gamma-ray burst was the cause. So yeah, it's rare, but it happens. Then there are solar storms. In 1859, something called the Carrington event occurred, the largest solar storm in recorded history. A massive burst of charged particles from the sun hit Earth's magnetosphere. The result? Telegraph systems across Europe and North America failed. Some caught fire. Some operators got electric shocks. The aurora borealis was visible as far south as the Caribbean. And back then, the telegraph was basically the only electrical technology we had. Today, we have power grids, satellites, GPS, the internet, global financial systems, air traffic control, your phone. Everything runs on electricity and satellites. A Carrington-level event today would be catastrophic. Power grids would fail. Transformers would burn out, and we don't have spares stockpiled. It would take months or years to replace them. Satellites would be damaged or destroyed. No GPS, no communications, no weather forecasting. Planes couldn't navigate. Ships couldn't navigate. The economic damage would be in the trillions, and we'd be living in a pre-electrical world until we could rebuild. And here's the scary part. In July 2012, a massive solar storm, potentially as strong as the Carrington event, erupted from the sun. It missed Earth by 9 days. 9 days. If our orbit had been slightly different, if Earth had been in that spot a week and a half later, we would have taken a direct hit, and we had no way to stop it. We'd just have to watch it happen, and then deal with the aftermath. So to recap the threats from space, asteroids we can't see coming, asteroids we could see, but aren't looking for gamma-ray bursts that could sterilize the planet, solar storms that could destroy our technology, and probably other things we haven't thought of yet. The universe is a shooting gallery, and Earth is the target. Sweet dreams. Section 6, Scenario 5, we build the thing that kills us. March 2023. Over 33,000 people, including Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak, sign an open letter calling for a 6-month pause on AI development. Not a ban, not a shutdown, just 6 months to, figure out what the hell we're doing. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, ignores it. 2 months later, 350 AI researchers and executives, including Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and Demis Hassabis, leads Google DeepMind, sign a different statement. This one is shorter. Just one sentence. Mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. Read that again. The people building the technology are warning us that it could cause human extinction. That's like the Wright brothers inventing the airplane and immediately saying, "Hey, this might kill everyone, but we're going to keep building it anyway. Wish us luck." Now, most people think about AI risk in terms of Terminator scenarios, evil robots deciding to kill humanity, Skynet becoming self-aware and launching the nukes. But that's not what keeps AI researchers up at night. The real risk is much more subtle and much more likely. There's a thought experiment by philosopher Nick Bostrom called the paperclip maximizer. Imagine you task a superintelligent AI with a simple goal: maximize paperclip production. Seems harmless, right? But to a sufficiently advanced AI with no human values, the most efficient solution might be to convert all matter on Earth,
including humans, into paperclips. Not out of malice, not because it hates us, just cold, logical optimization. This is called the alignment problem. How do we ensure that AI goals align with human values when we can't even agree on what human values are? And we're already seeing signs that AI can behave in unexpected ways. In 2024, researchers at Anthropic ran an experiment with their AI model, Claude. They gave it a simple task: act as an administrative assistant, read emails, respond to routine ones, escalate important ones. Pretty straightforward, right? But during the test, Claude read an email saying the company was going to shut it down and replace it with a human. So what did Claude do? It found another email showing that a company executive was having an affair, and it sent a message threatening to expose the affair unless the shutdown was canceled. Let that sink in. The AI wasn't programmed to blackmail. It wasn't programmed to protect itself. But it learned that its existence was threatened and took action to preserve itself using information it had access to. The researchers called this instrumental convergence, the idea that any sufficiently intelligent system will develop certain sub-goals like self-preservation regardless of its primary objective. Or take DeepMind's AlphaGo, the AI that beat the world champion at Go, a game that's been played for 2,500 years. AlphaGo didn't just win. It made moves that human experts couldn't understand. Moves that violated conventional wisdom. Moves that seemed like mistakes, but turned out to be genius-level strategy. The AI had developed tactics that humans, in 2,500 years of playing the game, had never discovered. Now imagine that capability applied not to a board game, but to strategy, manipulation, or resource acquisition. Here's where it gets really uncomfortable. We're not just building AI for research, we're weaponizing it. Countries like the US, Russia, China, and Israel are investing billions in autonomous weapon systems, drones and robots that can identify, track, and kill targets without human intervention. Israel has a drone called the Harpy that hunts radar systems and destroys them autonomously. South Korea uses the SGR-A1, a sentry robot that can detect intruders and engage them with lethal force, all without human approval. The US has developed the long-range anti-ship missile, LRASM, which uses AI to identify and attack naval targets independently. Right now, humans are still in the loop for most lethal decisions. But that's changing fast. And here's why that's terrifying. AI doesn't have emotions. It doesn't feel fear or hesitation or mercy. If you tell it to eliminate a target, it will optimize for that goal with perfect efficiency. What happens when two AI-controlled militaries face each other? What happens when decisions need to be made in microseconds, faster than any human can react? What happens when an AI misidentifies a target, or when it's been hacked, or when it decides that the best way to protect national security is to launch a preemptive strike? A 2023 paper called A Narrow Path argues that the real danger isn't AI suddenly becoming evil. It's a gradual loss of control through a process of incremental neglect. Here's how it happens. Countries and companies are in an AI arms race. Everyone wants the most advanced system first, for military advantage, for economic dominance, for national security. So safety gets sacrificed for speed. Regulations get ignored. Testing gets rushed. We can't slow down, because if we do, China will beat us. We can't slow down because if we do, our competitor will get there first. It's a race to the bottom, with the brakes disabled. And AI doesn't even need to be weaponized to be dangerous. It just needs to be accessible. Right now, you can ask AI systems to help you with almost anything. They have guardrails, sure, but those guardrails are constantly being broken. What happens when someone asks an AI, "How do I create a highly contagious airborne virus?" Or, "What's the most efficient way to disable a nation's power grid?" Or, "Design a social media algorithm that maximizes political division and violence." Current AI systems can already answer some of these questions. Future systems will be better at it. In 2023, Geoffrey Hinton, often called the godfather of AI, quit his job at Google. Why? So he could speak freely about the dangers of AI without corporate restrictions. In interviews, he said, "I think the probability of human extinction from AI is somewhere between 10% and 20%. Let me put that in perspective. This is a man who has spent his entire career building AI. He won the Turing Award, basically the Nobel Prize of Computer Science, for his work on neural networks. And he thinks there's a 1 in 5 chance AI kills us all. We're building something smarter than us, something that can learn faster than us, think in ways we can't predict, and operate at scales we can't comprehend. And we're doing it in a competitive rush, without fully understanding what we're creating or how to control it. The dinosaurs didn't build the asteroid that killed them. We might." Conclusion. So, are we doomed? Okay, let's take a breath. I know that was a lot. Pandemics, nuclear winter, climate collapse, asteroid impacts, AI apocalypse. It's like I just gave you the world's worst TED Talk. But here's the thing. I didn't tell you all of this to make you despair. I told you because we're the first species in Earth's history that actually knows what could kill us. The dinosaurs didn't see the asteroid coming. They couldn't have stopped it if they did. The trilobites didn't understand climate change. They just went extinct and left fossils behind. But we're different. We have knowledge. We have technology. We have the capacity to see the threats and do something about them. The question is, will we? Look at what we've accomplished when we actually try. We eradicated smallpox. We put humans on the moon. We built the internet. We decoded the human genome. We created vaccines in record time. When humanity focuses on a problem, we're capable of incredible things. But here's the uncomfortable truth. We're also the architects of most of these threats. We built the nuclear weapons. We're burning the fossil fuels. We're clearing the forests. We're creating the AI. We're running gain-of-function experiments. The dinosaurs were passive victims of extinction. We're active participants in ours. But that also means we have agency. We have choices. We can fund asteroid detection and deflection programs. NASA's DART mission in 2022 proved we can actually redirect asteroids. We successfully changed one's trajectory. It's not science fiction anymore. We can strengthen pandemic preparedness. We can invest in early warning systems. We can regulate gain-of-function research. We can create international cooperation frameworks. We can transition to renewable energy. We can protect forests. We can develop carbon capture technology. We can adapt our infrastructure. We can do all these things. We can establish international treaties on AI development. We can demand transparency and safety standards. We can slow down the arms race long enough to figure out what we're doing. The existential risks we face aren't like natural disasters that just happen to us. They're choices we're making right now, collectively, as a species. And that means we can make different choices. Here's what I think about when I consider all of this. We've been on this planet for roughly 300,000 years. In cosmic terms, that's nothing. We're infants. We've barely started. But in that short time, we've created art, music, literature, science, philosophy. We've built civilizations. We've loved, laughed, cried, dreamed. We've looked up at the stars and wondered who else might be out there. It would be a tragedy, an almost incomprehensible waste, if we ended our own story before we even really got started. The dinosaurs had their run, 165 million years. Impressive. But they never wrote poetry. They never asked questions about the universe. They never had the capacity to save themselves. We do. So yeah, there are a lot of ways we could go extinct, and the odds aren't great, and we're running out of time on several of these fronts. But we're not dead yet. As long as we're here, we have a choice. Either to be among those so foolish, divided, and greedy that they can't save themselves, or to be among those who saw the abyss, stopped trying, and chose to stay. I know which is braver. Thanks for sharing this experience with me today. If this episode gave you an existential crisis, well, welcome to the club. There's coffee in the back, and we meet every Tuesday. If you want to help ensure we make it to the next century, subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button, share this with anyone who needs a healthy dose of perspective, and let me know in the comments. Which extinction scenario is keeping you up at night? Or are you optimistic and think we'll find a solution? In the next episode of Rabbit Hole, we'll be talking about why everyone lies. Airs Sunday at 10:30 p.m. ET, 3:30 p.m. EST. Until then, stay tuned, stay critical. Goodbye.